Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who think that books don't reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rutherman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy X, which was released in 2001, was developed by Squaresoft, and published by Square. Of course, it's been re-released about 150,000 times, and in subsequent releases, it was developed by Square Enix. Or Squaresoft and not Square Enix. They changed their name somewhere in between the release of this game.
There was a merger of the Square and Enix, the two companies. Yeah.
So there's a whole thing.
Yeah. But before we jump into the discussion, it would mean a lot to us if you could leave a like or a rating if you appreciate the content.
Final Fantasy X is a JRPG, which I don't think I'm going to get much flack for saying. This is a very sort of like traditional cut and dry kind of JRPG, and I agonized over sort of what to start talking about until I decided to just let you deal with it. But I do want to start by saying, like, I am surprised that I enjoyed this game as much as I did, and I think part of that is nostalgia because I played this game back when I was like a wee lad, but now, like, I fully expected this to be a game that I came back to and went like, fuck this. Like, I hate everything about this. And I really didn't find myself doing that. It's rare for me to play an RPG and just, like, dive in head first and enjoy myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going to suggest we start as well, is, like, our history with the game, because I know probably unexpectedly to most people, you have a history with this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I also bought it back in the day, probably like a year or so after its release. I got it like in a discount bin. I hadn't played any Final Fantasy games. I was just like, oh, I've heard of this. You know, like picked it up. A classic childhood occurrence. And I played about a third of it and got stuck on something and like never came back to it. And it was always kind of like in the back of my mind, like I should go back and finish Final Fantasy X, but I just never did. It's one of those games. So this was my first full playthrough of it.
Yeah, when did I say this came out? Literally a minute ago? 2001. In 2001, I was young enough still that most of the games that I played were like, it's weird to call them like hand-me-downs because that's not really true. They were just games we owned in a library, but most of them were bought by my brother, who's several years older than I am. So like when I was a kid, I would just sort of pick something out and start playing it, and Final Fantasy was one of the games that I got like into, and like I didn't have as developed tastes as far as like things that I like and dislike, and was just so bemused by the idea of controlling 3D characters in a video game that like I pretty much loved everything that I played. Mm-hmm. Famously, Glover, a game that everyone hates, is like the only game that I didn't like when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like such a shill, an industry shill for even saying that. I want to be the dark horse. He's like, Glover was actually great, but I'm not.
I feel like I liked it as a kid, but I liked any kind of like mascot platformer adjacent thing. So. Mm-hmm. Like just blindly as a kid, because that was my shit.
Yeah, it kind of still is.
Yeah, well, yeah, but even more so back then.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Glover is actually terrible, and I wouldn't like it now. But
next time.
But one thing you kind of skirted up against there, or skirted past, whatever the expression is,
mm-hmm.
Was how it looked, like controlling 3D characters, and like that was one of the big like selling points of this game, or one of the things that was significant about it when it came out was like how good it looked.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was in development at the same time as Final Fantasy IX and came out like a year later, I think. And you look at Final Fantasy IX and it looks like a PS1 game, like a very good looking PS1 game, but a PS1 game. And then you look at Final Fantasy X and it just like blows it out of the water. Like it looks, the leap in graphical quality is enormous.
Yeah.
And that was like a big thing about this game that even I can remember that about it from 2001, and I was like 11 back then, and I can remember people making a big deal about it.
Yeah, that was a big part of its marketing push, and also like has cemented this idea in the general populace's mind that like you associate Square Enix with these like over the top like super silky smooth like pre-rendered graphics and stuff, to the point where we talked about it. I don't know if we talked about it on the original Kingdom Hearts episode, but at least on Kingdom Hearts 3 we mentioned it with all of these like extravagant like cutscenes and stuff. It's like, I think on the Kingdom Hearts 3 were complaining that they didn't look as good as the studio is known for. But I think this is the game that started that.
It absolutely is, because I think adjusted for inflation, this is like the most like financially like profitable game that they've ever put out. Even though I think Final Fantasy VII sold more units in its time. So, like, and I think they looked at that and were like, people really respond to, like, a beautiful-looking game, and they kind of, like, made that their thing, and it ended up, like, shooting themselves in the foot pretty hard as it got into, like, the PS3 and 4 generations, where it became so much more expensive to produce something, like, graphically impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, this game uses a lot of, like, little cheats and stuff, and I'm actually happy to go into talking about the visuals here, because I think there are a lot of places where you can see the, I don't know, like the direction, like the art direction especially, sort of like pointing to the game's strengths. And so I think the first thing that we should acknowledge here probably is that most recently we both played the HD like remaster of the game.
Yeah.
So I played the original PS2 version. I have long since misplaced that copy of the game.
I have it. Yeah, I thought about booting it up and playing some of it, but didn't.
Right, because that would take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have like compared screenshots and stuff to sort of like get an idea as to what was done, and I'm impressed in two ways. One, that the original PS2 game actually holds up better than I expected it to, and also how good they did of a job of like up-resing everything in the PS4 version. I'm not like a graphics guy, so I can't exactly describe what I think was done and how well it was done, but I looked at it and I went, wow, looks pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly all goes into remastering. Like, obviously they up-res the textures to HD quality, but like I don't know if they go back and like smooth out the models and stuff. Like, it's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, like it looks like they only just updated the textures, really, and I'm sure they smoothed out other things under the hood.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, it just needed like the visual, like the resolution enhancement, and it still looks good.
Yeah, and I mean it's one of the strengths of the RPG genre as a whole. In when you have a turn-based combat system, you can spend a whole lot of time working on things that are not base mechanics, because everything's operated with a menu. You don't have to fuck around with like attack frames and hitboxes and stuff. You just play animations, and well, that can be really funny at times because of like the way that different animations interact with different enemies. Watching Auron do shooting star on a sandworm will never be old to me. It's just hysterical. But the like that is why I think that like Square gets this like reputation, because the type of games that they're making, they get to spend a lot of that budget on the things that people remember about the game: the visuals, the music, the storylines. Like those are the Final Fantasy things, and you will have diehards and people talk to you about like, oh well, the combat system in Final Fantasy VIII was slightly different than the combat system in Final Fantasy IX because of this and that. Like in the long run, and we're going to spend time, like probably a lot of time, talking about mechanics and how the battle system works, but in the end, that's not what people remember this game for.
Yeah, that's really, I think, at least to me, it's like their greatest value as a developer is like they know how to pluck at your heartstrings and really create like a game that you'll remember. Even their games that wasn't a huge fan of that I've played, like they stick in my memory. They usually have great music, like they have all those qualities that like I think people connect with.
Mm-hmm.
They always like put a lot of value in that stuff, even from like back in the NES days.
Yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy music as like a whole is definitely one of those things that's just like a cultural touchstone within the sphere of people who play video games. People just know that shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that what we want to... Because, like, normally we keep the music for the end, which I think should speak on how good the music is that we brought it up this early.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the music. I feel like this is up there as far as Final Fantasy soundtracks go. Like, maybe not as a whole as strong as some of the others, but there's some really standout tracks, like the Hymn of the Faith, which is going to be the song I request you put in as the mid-roll, but you do whatever you want. I love that song. It's just like a simple, like choir chant, but it's like really hypnotic almost. Like it's a really strong melody there. I like the Ronso theme, or it might just be Kamari's theme. Like it's really good. And there's a number of others. I know I've told you like several times, but I listened to this like chill video game music playlist, and like there's a handful of songs from this game on it. Mm-hmm. So it was really weird for me to encounter them like in context, kind of like you and
Twilight Princess.
The Zelda
Skyward Sword.
The Zelda mod for Skyrim.
Yeah. We're reaching back for that reference, but yes.
Yeah, so there was like a weird like familiarity to it already, because as you were saying, like people in the video game community just kind of fucking love Final Fantasy music, so I already knew like 4 of the songs.
Yeah, and like to this day, I've played exactly 3 Final Fantasy games. I've played 7, 10, and 15, and I didn't finish 7 or 15. So I don't know, maybe we'll do something on one of those for the podcast at some point, and I will have to finish them, or we'll play a different one, who knows. Mm-hmm. But I've never really associated myself with like being a fan of Final Fantasy music, and I know a lot of people are very like religious about it, and this game kind of like helped me realize like, oh, there are a lot of Final Fantasy songs that I just like fucking know from being in the zeitgeist. Mm-hmm. Like it's not just One Winged Angel and shit. Like you just know, like the Final Fantasy VII battle theme is really iconic.
Yeah,
and it's like everyone, the fanfare is like basically a meme. Like it's in genetics at this point.
Yeah, like everyone knows the prelude, like the menu theme, and like as you said, the victory theme. The Chocobo song, like it's the
I up to this point have been calling it the love theme from Final Fantasy X. So yeah, that makes more sense that it's called Prelude. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Chocobo song especially, and I was joking to just me, which is the thing I do because I'm a lunatic, about using the Chocobo song that I said slapped ass. Like the jazzy muted trumpet rendition that they play in this game, but as the mid-roll. But I probably won't. But do look that up if you haven't heard it. It's really good. Yeah, no, I don't know. That's there were a lot of these songs that are just real fucking good, and songs that I hear and realize that I've heard before. And, like, they trigger a response. And that's what you want music to do.
Yeah, and don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure, like, the victory, like, you finish the battle and you get, like, your items and things from the enemies song, like, that theme is used in Kingdom Hearts 2 for the gummy ship. Like, whenever you finish a gummy mission, I swear it plays, like, the same music.
Right.
So they just, like, lifted that and put it in Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, I do want to shout out the song that plays in Home in the Albed area.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Is the worst song in the game and is horribly annoying, and I wanted it to end at all times.
I can't say I remember it.
God, I wish I was you. It's the one that has like people saying shit in the background, and I swear to my ear, what they're saying sounds like annoying grunt. Like they're saying the words annoying grunt. And it has all of these like harsh staccato brass notes that come in. It's like I'm gonna have to fuck with that in the audio because I definitely bottomed it out. But it's horrible and I hate it. Every other song though, pretty good.
Can't argue with that.
No, you can. Oh wait, actually, I have one other. I have a dishonorable mention.
Okay.
And I feel like this is, if I'm gonna have an opinion here, because I'm gonna be pretty lukewarm to good on most things in the game. And this is going to be the thing that gets me hate, if anything does. The music that they play over the Ject fight is stupid and bad.
Oh, with the lyrics?
The lyrics and, like, the fucking metal guitar. They tuned that shit to drop D for that one. I don't understand. Like, people talk about it. I read something online that was like, oh, and the final boss music kicks ass, and I'm like, it kicks ass in the way that the season 2 theme for Death Note kicks ass, in that it doesn't kick any ass at all.
Yeah, like for me, like it was super jarring when it first came on, but then I settled into it pretty quickly, and was able to just kind of tune out the fact that there was like a 2000s like
new metal
like vocalist singing. But I think it's something that definitely feels like it would have gone over better at the time, when it would have been like way more novel, like, oh, they put like a metal song in the game, like, oh, hell yeah. But yeah, it felt weird to me now, but it didn't really bother me too much.
Yeah, no, I wasn't like upset about it.
Yeah,
it was just, I was expecting something more orchestral, and I got that, and didn't know what to do with that information once I had it.
Yeah, something like Xenoblade battle music that has like electric guitars probably would have worked better.
That's true, yeah. Xenoblade also good music, but we'll talk about that on the Xenoblade episode 5 years from now.
When we finally finish it.
Yeah.
Because it's so long.
Yeah, okay. This game isn't the longest game that we've played on the podcast. And I know I spent too many hours in it than were needed, but I have this, like, conception of this game in my head, of this game being like a sprawling million billion hour type game. And I think we both have an idea as to why I have that perception in my head. But I'm curious, like, is that the way that you think of this or not?
Not really. Like, this kind of brings me to my thesis statement about the game. Whereas I think this is just my own speculation, but I'd be pretty surprised if it isn't true, but I'll never know, probably. So I feel like in the pursuit, or like in their ambition for such high fidelity visuals at the time, like they really wanted to like wow people with that, they had to like streamline and cut things that you'd typically see in like the PS1 era Final Fantasy games. Like, there aren't really towns or cities. Like, there's just kind of like some huts in the places where like the temples are. And there's no world map. And you don't get, I think a big thing that could have made like a pretty big difference is that they gave you access to the airship earlier, because you don't get it till like the end.
Right.
And just stuff like that, I think in like a lot of the areas are like linear corridors, with a few like slightly more open areas. So like I think a lot of those decisions feel like they were made in order to like make the game look as nice as it is. And for me, it makes the game feel a little bit more limited or like shallow as a result, in comparison to like its brethren.
Right. Yeah, my like comparison point for me anyway, for like a sprawling RPG that I've actually played, is Persona 5. And Persona 5 similarly has very small areas. Like, there isn't a whole lot of like walking about that you do in the game. You just kind of go to where you want to do a task, do that task, and then move on. And that game is very long because it has a lot of like, it just has a ton of content wrapped around that. And I think that you're right, like where Persona 5 put an emphasis on creating a lot of things to do in small areas, Final Fantasy X has few things to do in really good looking small areas. Like I think that the art, the mini map in this game doesn't, it almost betrays how much work was put in visually. And like my shining example of this is Mount Gagazet, where it looks like a perilous mountain trek with like little tiny rock bridges that you're walking up. But then you see the mini map and you're just like, this whole area is just like somebody took a crayon and like zigzagged on a paper and then they rendered it in 3D.
Yeah, and I highly recommend turning the mini map off, because I played it that way because it seemed super unnecessary because of how linear the game is. And if you ever feel like you need it, you can just like quickly swap it on and see where you need to go. So yeah, I highly recommend that, because like I think I switched it on in the desert at one point, and it's just like it does really shrink the space. Like you can just see the borders of like where everything is, and you're like, oh, I thought this was like a huge desert.
Right.
So like yeah, the like the pre-rendered backgrounds and the art assets, I think get to shine a lot more when you don't have the mini map on.
Yeah. The minimap is kind of bad, though I understand their need for it, because like they couldn't have made the desert a big, huge, sprawling desert and expected it to work. So they were like, well, we'll put the minimap so people know to not like just try and run into walls.
They could have always just like given you a map of the desert or something, like give you maps for bigger areas, but
yeah, I don't know.
It's also, I think, a little bit to do with the pre-rendered backgrounds. Like, that's always been, like, they look really nice, at least in my opinion. But there's always, like, at least a couple of them that have, like, some jank. Like, oh, I didn't realize I could go there. Like, I interpreted this a different way than it actually is.
Right.
And you don't get that too much here, but it does happen occasionally. And then that's when you might want to switch the mini-map on and be like, oh, this isn't a path. That's the path.
Right. Yeah, because like you end up, this happens both when you have the minimap on and off, but you will end up just running into invisible walls kind of a lot, and it's just because the game doesn't really, except for one instance, doesn't require you to like do anything taxing with your movement, then it doesn't matter as much. Like I never go online and hear people be like, Final Fantasy X sucked because of all the invisible walls. Like it's just kind of an accepted thing in the medium, but it gets a little awkward sometimes when you have these larger areas that feel like they're really expansive, and then you run up against a wall that just doesn't look like it should be there.
The sand dunes are a very good example of that.
It's like, why can I walk over this one but not that one and shit like that? Yeah,
it's like, why is the path like behind this pile of junk and this like little gap between two sand dunes that it doesn't look like it should be able to walk through at all?
Yep. It's they made a lot of decisions there, but I do think that the art really carries it. Like it looks real good, even though there isn't a whole ton to do.
You got to cut it some slack for coming out in 2001.
Checking my notes there for anything that I wrote down related to visuals, I discovered I wrote down nothing. So.
Well, one thing that you brought up to me while you were playing that I just thought was funny is that you mentioned that Seymour, the antagonist, is like the most Tetsuya Nomura looking character design ever.
Yeah.
And not that it's like a meaningful disagreement or anything, but I was just thinking about that, and I was like, Seymour kind of reminds me a lot of like the original character designer for Final Fantasy. His name is Yoshitaka Amano.
Okay.
And and I apologize in advance for my pronunciation of this, but like his art is influenced by ukiyo woodblock prints.
Okay.
I probably pronounced that horribly wrong, so I apologize again. But and that painting in Animal Crossing, the finger guns guy, is in that style, but I don't think it's very representative of it as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
He did this, my phone background. Like, this is his style.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the like clothing and costume design that he does is very like like imperial or feudal Japan, like royalty robes and stuff, which is exactly what Seymour's wearing. And I felt like Seymour's character design feels like the perfect combination of their two sensibilities. Like, he does look super Nomura, and he also looks very Amano. It's like they just smashed their sensibilities together to get Seymour.
I feel like, though, if the design was presented to both of them and they didn't work on it, I feel like Nomura would have signed off on it. The other guy would have been like, well, we should at least change the hair, right?
Yeah, the hair is the most Nomura part. You are absolutely correct.
But Nomura he's the character designer for this game, generally.
Yeah, the main one.
And I went back and forth. So I was like a ping pong match, whether I liked or hated anything about this design, like the visual, which is a classic Nomura, where you're like, I don't know if I love this or if I hate it.
You mean Seymour or all the characters?
Every NPC, every main character, everyone. Because I was like, oh, what is this, like, shopkeeper just basically wearing a bikini? But then, like, every dude is also just wearing a bikini, so, like, it just seems like culturally it's a real bikini sort of basis for all of their clothing. Like, basically, if you are not a priest or a summoner or
a main character,
yeah, even if you're a main character occasionally, you were just wearing some form of like BDSM or swimwear at all times. They're just probably the single body part most frequently modeled by people at Square was a butt cheek. Like, it was just, there were cheeks all over, and it was really strange and jarring. And then I got used to it, and then I kind of like chided myself for getting used to it. It's just a really bizarre thing to see, and it is. In the end, I like all of the main character designs well enough. I have ups and downs and shit, but generally speaking, I like them. And I think that the NPCs look hilarious. But fortunately and wisely, almost none of them are ever important. So
I agree pretty much, just straight up. I do like all the main characters' designs. Like, I think it's especially in like this kind of era, it really helps to like look at Nomura's actual like illustrations of the characters, because like I feel like even at this point that this game looks really good, but like they don't quite translate one-to-one like the designs into like a 3D medium like they can do nowadays. And so yeah, I think they look stronger like on the page, like when you see them like drawn out. But I agree 100% that like the NPCs look pretty bad across the board. Even like the significant ones like Sid or like the other like rival summoner and her lackey buff man.
Oh yeah.
Like they all look really bad. And that's another thing
her
where
name is just Donna. Also.
Donna.
It's
Donna.
like not at all a fantasy name. It's just Donna.
Maybe it sounds fantasy-y in Japan.
Possibly.
But yeah, like it feels like another one of those things that they had to like sacrifice for like the visual fidelity overall. Is like all of the NPCs had to be like less impressive looking to like make things work. Yeah.
Well, I mean, less impressive, not like in comparison maybe to the main characters, but like NPCs in Final Fantasy games prior to this were just the same three sprites reused over and over again. So there's an improvement there. And there are actually kind of a lot of unique models, like a lot of different people who inhabit Spira, and I don't slight them for that. It's just they look very strange all the time.
Yeah, I think what I mean is that they're just like noticeably lower poly than the main characters, so it just looks weird.
You mentioned Sid, the fucking scene where Sid turns around and is like addressing everyone while looking forward. And then the camera pans and he has a sad look on his face, is like, oh man, if I was used to stuff looking like that, I'm sure I wouldn't have noticed it as badly. But like looking at it now, it looks so fucking terrible. It's one of the many instances where something like either some combination of the animation or the art or the voice acting or dialogue made me laugh in like an unintentional kind of way. And that was like one of the peak moments for me. It's like when Sid just has like a distressed look on his face when he really only had one facial expression prior to that, and they wanted to make it a point to show him being distressed.
Mm-hmm.
Just really good.
Yeah, and it's just like Kingdom Hearts cuts or like out of cutscene face, where it's just like a texture that changes.
Yep. Oh man, I wanted to talk about the voice acting and how I don't understand what happened. So, God, what is his name? The guy who plays Waka and also Bender and Jake.
Oh.
It's DiMaggio. John DiMaggio?
I feel like Joe DiMaggio was a baseball player, wasn't he?
Yes. Maybe that isn't his name.
I don't remember his name.
Well, what I'm trying to say here is I'm pretty sure that he has an Emmy. And it's like, it cannot be, it is John. It's John DiMaggio.
Okay.
And it's not his performance. It can't be just his performance that makes the dialogue sound bad. It's like them dubbing over the Japanese animations and trying to make the timing work.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess.
Yeah, the voice. It's definitely the voice direction, especially like, and I'm by no means like an expert or anything on this, but I have heard like, because voice acting is something that I find really interesting. I have heard people talk about like the art of dubbing and how it's like really, really complicated. And especially, I'm pretty sure like from the ones that I've played, like the localization team for Square cares a lot about like trying to match the lips as much as they can, because I feel like they do it really well most of the time. So yeah, that's definitely part of it. And yeah, I think just back at the time there weren't really standards for this. Like I've done a lot of thinking about it in relation to like Kingdom Hearts, whereas I feel like this is a little bit of a tangent or whatever sidebar, but I feel like Metal Gear Solid gets a lot of like credit for being like the first game to like really take voice acting seriously and like put it in the game as if it's like a film or something. But I think Kingdom Hearts similarly deserves a lot of credit for being like the earliest game to have just like a professional ass voice cast.
Right.
Because like it has all the Disney talent, and then all the like people who voice like the original characters are like were up and coming actors, and like you didn't see that back then. And this Kingdom Hearts came out like a year after this, so like it's definitely, you saw like it was rare for games to have good voice acting at the time, and probably when it came out, this was probably seen as like a game with like high quality voice acting.
Yeah, and I mean, and they had people who were genuinely very good at their job. Like I think the voice actor for Auron is really good. And I mean, I am very torn on Tidus. I think that my overall impression is that the delivery was mostly bad, but I don't hate his voice. Like, I think that he brings a life to the character, which is important. And I like Yuna, and pretty much every other character can just not ever speak again.
I think I feel the exact opposite.
You think everyone else?
I think Tidus and Yuna are my least favorite of the cast.
I think what it is they're given a lot of lines, which gives you ample time to like be like, I don't like any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And everybody else doesn't talk as much. I think that they do a good job given the scope of their performance.
I guess I wouldn't disagree with that. Especially, I watched a video like a long time ago where someone interviewed the voice actor for Tidus, and they asked him about the laugh scene. And it definitely has endeared me to the voice performance more, because it definitely seems like they told him to give a corny performance. Like, they specifically told him to laugh the way that he laughs in that scene.
Right.
So like I think a lot of the like more annoying or over the top things in his performance are like supposed to be that way. And the guy who voiced him does seem like a pretty cool dude.
Right. I mean, yes, the laugh scene is a little bit weird, and it's kind of weird that they show it 2 times through the game. But yes, it is intentional that it's supposed to be like a strained laugh. And it plays into the scene, and a lot of people show the clip out of context. I would hope that when we boil everything down at the end of this podcast, we have some kind of criticism that is more substantial than that. Because that is either everybody thinks that the laugh scene is ridiculous and that's why they think the voice acting is bad, or everybody likes to spout off the fact that it's always taken out of context.
Yeah.
And so that is like, we can take that scene and we put it in a special place because it's a great scene. I love watching it. But we can set it aside for the time being and just talk about like generally how the voices worked in the game. And like, I'm glad that everything was voice acted. Like, I think that there's a lot of text in the game, and the fact that so much of it is voice acted is a big, like, it's helpful for the enjoyment of the person playing it.
Yeah, and this was also the first Final Fantasy game to have voice acting, which is another reason why like the localization might have had like a rougher time with it, because it's the first time they'd done it.
That's definitely very possible.
But yeah, I think my problem's like, because the laugh scene, although you just said to put it in a bin.
A special bin.
But I'm gonna take it back out for a second. But like, at least like Tidus's voice actor like fucking goes for it. Like when Yuna chimes in, it gets like 8 times worse, because her doing it is just like makes me want to rip my face off.
Yeah, a lot of early game Yuna's dialogue is,
she's got that deadpan like Renaissance fair princess thing going on,
and it has been a long time since I've heard that Yuna. But it's not a great look, I want to say. And I think, like, I don't know how far away we're getting from it, but the dialogue is important because the story is an important piece of this game. And while I like the overarching story a lot more than I thought I would based on my memory of it, I do not buy the relationship between Yuna and Tidus. Like, I don't think it's believable, and I think at least some of that has to do with the voice acting, but then a lot of it has to do with the fact that Tidus doesn't get a name, because they wanted you to hang on to that name your own character thing. So at the beginning,
no one says his name.
Yeah, so nobody says his name, and so it's really hard to buy into a relationship where one of the people literally never says the other person's name. Cannot, through the logic of the system that it's implemented in, say their lover's name, which is such a weird thing in the world.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's as much the dialogue itself, but I think my central thesis applies to the narrative as well. Whereas I feel like the narrative to me, while I think feels like it was like streamlined or condensed well, I feel like it was streamlined and condensed. Like, it feels like it has stuff taken out of it, and I think that might also lead to like there aren't a lot of points where like things like pump the brakes and are allowed to breathe. Like, we have scenes where the characters just talk to each other about what's happening. Like my big example for this is like Kumari's story.
Oh yeah,
you get to his village, air quotes. There's no village.
No.
They're just on a mountain.
There's an archway.
Yeah, like, and then like he had like a backstory about how like he was challenged. Like, he's a warrior. He's from a warrior culture, and he like lost some kind of challenge, and it broke his horn, and he was like shunned by his kind. And then they would have to return there on the pilgrimage. and he fights the guy who beat him before, and then he beats them, and then it's just like, okay, Kamari's story's over, move on. Like, that's all that happens.
Yep.
It's just like, and then 5 minutes later, Seymour shows up, and he's like, I've killed your whole race.
Yep.
And then Kamari doesn't even get, like, a reaction shot.
You can talk to see. I didn't, because as noted many times in my life, didn't use Kamari very much. He apparently you can talk to Seymour, and Kamari will say some shit, but Kamari is not, like, fluent enough in whatever the common language is called for that to land emotionally. I don't think, like, in the context of a battle speech. Like, if he got a scene, then it could have worked, but he just doesn't. Like fucking Seymour commits a genocide, and then
it's just not acknowledged by the narrative at all.
It's weird. I went back to the village, and there's still Ronso there. And when you the village, I went back to the archway, and there's still Ronso there, and you talk to them, and they're just like, Seymour killed a lot of the Ronso. I was like, this motherfucker.
Where were there? Was there a village around here?
He's out here calling Kamara the last Ronso. And he's just kind of like called it a bit. Like, he's not, I'm not saying that murder is okay, but like, don't put yourself out there as a genocider when you haven't really done it. Like,
yeah, so like, I was just imagining like what that would be like in one of like the PS1 era Final Fantasies, and I'm like, you would have shown up to the town, and you would have like spent some time in it, and like maybe done a few side tasks for some of the Ronso, and like got to, like, you know, they were doing like a little narrative with Kamari, then you'd do his little fight, then you'd move on. It'd be like a couple of hours spent, and then when Seymour destroys the whole town, it would be like, oh fuck, that town that I care about.
Yep.
And then like you could maybe go back, and it would be like demolished and shit. I feel like that's how it would have happened.
Yeah, because it would have had more narrative weight, because you would have known some of the people who got killed.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, I guess you know B-Ron and the other dude.
I'm surprised that you remembered one of their names.
I remembered B-Ron because I read it as Brian for a long time. I thought it was funny.
Hey, B-Ron. It sounds like a nickname.
Yeah, for Brian.
Yeah.
And the other guy, but that's about it. But it would have had more narrative weight, and then it could have also had mechanical weight, because you just lost like maybe a save point and a shop and like side quests that you missed or something like that. So it would have been a better scene if the game was longer. But I understand though what you're saying about it being streamlined.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a number of scenes or moments like that throughout the game. And, you know, it's just kind of like it's clearly like an intentional choice they made to like cut some things to like and like shuffle their priorities to like make the game look the way they wanted it to. But
right. Yeah. And that is like a whole thing. Because like I said, because that even leads into Mount Gagazet, which is, as I said, the crayon scribbling map. So they like, I feel like, and it's not all like backloaded, like, because Besaid is a village. There are houses and townspeople, and then you go to Yucca, which is a village. It's much smaller, even though it is a much larger, like, geographical space. You can only go between like 4 areas.
Yeah, the one's like a dock.
Yeah,
that was that's the only place in the game that feels like a real town.
That's like,
it's like Kilika.
Yeah, Kilika.
Yeah.
And then the Yucca is the place where the blitzball tournament takes place.
Yeah. And that feels more like it's just like a complex.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you leave for one scene where Yuna gets kidnapped, and then you come back immediately. That's the extent of it. There's not a lot of navigable space, but it's like portrayed as a big thing. And then like you go to these smaller and smaller areas. There's the Jose Temple is a temple on the side of the road, and there's a tent next to it. Who even named that?
Is that the one with Ixion in it?
I think
the lightning themed one.
Yeah, I know which summon is Ixion, but I don't remember where you get it. Is that your third or your fourth one?
That's the third one.
Then it's it's that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just has like a tent or two next to it.
There's a tent where apparently Titus slept, which is also where the merchant is, and then Yuna gets the cushy digs in the priest's quarters, and then everybody else, I don't know where the fuck they were. But that's a common theme throughout the game. You have a party of 7 people, and man, it doesn't seem like 7 people will be able to do a lot of the shit that you do in this game.
Yeah.
So I just kind of it wasn't even in my head when it happened.
Yeah, it's like the narrative focuses in real heavily on like Titus, Yuna, and Auron as it goes on, and it's after Waka and Lulu have their shit at the beginning, pretty much after Blitzball, they just don't do anything anymore, and Riku doesn't really have anything going on. She's Yuna's cousin, and it's her connections that get you the airship, but she doesn't really have a story.
Right. And I will give... So Waka, I think, and don't know this, I think can have a story if you play Blitzball, which, let's just say... This game has a lot of different things that you can focus on, and you're going to end up skipping 2. And one of them is going to be something that you didn't really engage with, and the other one is Blitzball. I've heard that it's a really well fleshed out minigame, but I didn't play a single game of Blitzball.
Yeah, so I obviously remembered Blitzball from my time playing this as a kid. You can't forget Blitzball.
No. Let's blitz.
Because you get to it, and then they're here's 87 tutorials on how to play Blitzball.
It's a whole screen.
Yeah, and so... it just, this whole big thing, it's super complicated, and it's so confusing. At least that's how I remembered it. And I'm I'm going to go into it now as an adult and, try to actually, do, anything, any good at Blitzball. And lo and behold, it's the exact same experience as an adult. It's so much, and it's so finicky, and I can't even begin to describe, how big of a miss Blitzball is for me being enjoyable.
We are kindred spirits, because I thought exactly the same thing. I was I'm an adult, I'm going to read the tutorials, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to win Blitzball. And I read 2 of the tutorials, looked at my watch that I wasn't wearing, and went, nope.
Yeah, I got through half of them, and I'm okay, this is probably enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is taking forever. Because they're not short.
No, they sure aren't.
And then I played however many matches you do in the story, 2 of them or whatever, and I scored 1 goal, and that was it, and we lost.
I went... So it's 2 halves of one game that you play, right?
Okay,
and
yeah.
In the first half, totally scoreless. I understood enough about how the mechanics worked to prevent the other team from scoring, but not enough to know how to score myself. And then in the second half, I don't know if this happens every game, but we still hadn't scored. Nobody had scored until the 1 minute warning or whatever. And then Waka comes on and takes Titus's place. And then I was they're just going to autopilot the rest of this because I didn't know what I was doing and didn't score any goals. But no, they just make you play as Waka instead of Titus.
Yeah.
And I was oh shit, fuck, damn it. And then they scored 1 goal and won the game. I was my one chance. Maybe a draw would have been better. I don't know.
Yeah. Apparently I was doing some reading, you can recruit people around the world to be on your team, which you wouldn't know.
I did this when I was a kid. I recruited people, and I played a few other games of Blitzball, even though I never understood what was going on. And so, I had these people, and I was paying them salary to play Blitzball that I didn't do. I don't know when it took the money out, but, it's, in increments of, between 10 and, 1,000 gil a game or something. It's a really weird mechanic. It's a lot. There's a lot in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's weird because I actually really like the decision to make Titus an athlete. I think it's an interesting and unique thing for a protagonist, especially at the time. And I like that they lean into it so hard and make Blitzball a thing in the game. But Tidus is supposed to be like a great blitzball star, and he's the character you're playing as. And then they make it so complicated, so when you play, you suck ass. You're like, man, I thought Tidus was supposed to be good at this, but like I suck at this. It's just like it creates this like weird like dissonance.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like anytime, like, so one of the strengths of a JRPG, right, is that you can give your character this backstory of making them a great warrior, and like he can fucking cut a rock in half with his sword. It's incredible. He's amazing. And then in your first battle, they just make the enemies so weak that it does seem like you're just fucking destroying them, and then they amp the scales up over and over again. This game does the same thing. It amps the scales up, or the stakes, whatever. I said scales twice. Didn't make sense either time. They ramp it up to like god-destroying monsters, and your character is a blitzball player who sucks at blitzball, but is super good at just like fucking shooting down God.
Yeah, in my mind, Tidus was actually never any good at blitzball, like in my headcanon, and he was a fraud the whole time.
In my headcanon, he actually was just too close to Sin's toxins.
Of course.
Yeah.
It explains why Jack is so hard on him, because he actually did suck at blitzball.
Yeah. When he jumps off the thing in the Xanarkand ruins at the end, he was just a corporeal person. He just felt he was dead.
The monster was unrelated.
Yeah. Also, side note to my side note to this side note to the conversation that we were having before. Jack, at the end of the game, maybe this isn't the time to talk about it. Let's talk about the story later. But Wonka, to go back to it, doesn't really get a story. But Lulu gets this like weird coda at the end because she has this moment, and it's a blink and you'll miss it moment, when you fight a big rock monster as a boss. Which is stupid. It's dumb.
Like in the Calm Lands?
Yeah, it's like you leave the Calm Lands, and then or is it right before you get
It's
there?
after. Yeah, okay, it's right when you leave.
And there's a Guado there, and they're like, come with us, you're a traitor. And you're like, nah. And they're like, okay, here's a rock monster that I guess
take this.
We brought from home. And the rock monster comes down, you fight the rock monster. And then you go to Krause's bridge, and there's a little pathway down, and like Lulu looks at it if you try to go down the pathway, and she's like, don't go down that pathway. And then I think Tidus looks at some other party member and is like, she really knows her way around here, huh? And that's it. There's a whole scene. If you go back there at the end of the game, there's a place called like the Shrine of the Stolen Faith, which is where you get the optional Aeon Yojimbo, the only one of the optional Aeons that I got. And it's revealed that is like the location of her first summoner's death. And like you fight the ghost of her first summoner, and it's like it's a moment where like Lulu's supposed to have this like development and stuff, but you don't know shit about any of this.
Yet she does mention that it just in the Calm Lands when you get to like the little hut that's in the middle of it.
When the cool pastor priest Zook, who's great, I love him.
The cool pastor is there, yeah. But she mentions, like, we didn't make it much farther past this on, like, the first pilgrimage that I went on or whatever. So, it gets, that's all that it gets, is that mention.
That mention, the one mention, and then it gets a dungeon and an optional Aeon.
Yeah.
So, like, it feels like a lot of importance placed on the very end, and none on the setup. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, other than Lulu gets the smallest bit of character development, and really the three that you mentioned are the only ones who get, like, a real story.
Yeah.
But I guess, as Tidus says, it is his story. So.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. It's like the man says.
Do you want to talk about the actual full narrative of this game, and then get into the mechanic stuff? After the break?
Yes.
All right. All right. Cut the preamble, because we're back.
Cut the prelude.
Cut the love theme from Final Fantasy X. Welcome back. I feel like we're going to get caught up in a lot of weeds if we begin talking about anything to do with fighting monsters with swords and shit.
Uh-huh.
So, I think we've made a lot of progress already talking about the narrative, is particularly in the personal side of things where the character interactions feel kind of lacking and stuff. But how do you feel, as somebody who's played more than 3 Final Fantasy games, about the overall narrative with Sin and Yevon, and Yuna Leska, and all the Y names, especially in comparison to the other games in the series?
I love it conceptually, but I feel like it suffers from a lot of the problems I was levying at like the narrative on the first half. I feel like in like 7, 8, and 9 all have moments of like there's a certain kind of pacing to their stories. Like they have, as I said, like moments to breathe and like moments to kind of like do side things, like kind of peppered throughout. And some things that like I kind of wish there was like more time spent in like Dream Xanarkand at the beginning, or like some flashbacks to it. Like maybe after Tidus like learns what he is, he gets to like he like flashes back, or like gets to like go back and visit Dream Xanarkand and like actually like talk to Yevon and maybe give some characterization to him, or like and like this is kind of unrelated, but it just popped into my head. But like, I really love the detail that like the Blitzball salute becomes like a prayer gesture. Mm-hmm. I thought that was like a really cool detail that you probably could have like pulled more stuff like that if you got to see Xanarkand more at the beginning.
Right.
And like, I also thought it would have been cool to like have parts where you actually play as Jecht, Braska, and Auron on like their pilgrimage. Like you do like a parallel like flash sideways, because like 7 did stuff like that where like you had to play as like Zack and Sephiroth, and like Cloud and Sephiroth doing things in the past. Mm-hmm. So like just comparing it to its predecessors, it feels like it's lacking a lot of those kinds of details. And like I don't know, like it just those things that really kind of like make people hold up the storytelling in the Final Fantasy games. Like a lot of that stuff's kind of missing here, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, okay, so you brought up my one thing that I don't feel like I fully understand, which is what was the Faith's plan from the beginning to make Tidus show up and kill Sin? Like, because they say that they dreamed of Xanarkand without Sin, right? And then Sin shows up after Jecht leaves Xanarkand, because he's now become Sin. So they exist. They say that Xanarkand that stood existed 1,000 years ago, and maybe it did, sure. But I don't think that Tidus was a guy in that Xanarkand. I think that Tidus only exists in the dream version of Xanarkand. Mm-hmm. And it's like a parallel universe, and the bleed over is when Sin shows up in Xanarkand and abducts him. So I don't know how Jecht left.
Right, that's the one, like, from, this is just what I was able to gather from looking stuff up online. Mm-hmm. Like, that's, like, the one plot hole, is you can't explain how Jecht left Dream Xanarkand.
Right.
But it is Jecht that is responsible for Tidus ending up in the real world, because he asks Auron to watch after Tidus, and Auron is able to go to Dream Xanarkand because he is unsent.
Right.
And so, and then Sin shows up and pulls Auron and Tidus back into Real Spira so that they can defeat him.
Right.
And I think you're correct that Tidus, like, the Dream Xanarkand is like a dream of the faith, and that was created by Yevon, who is the leader of Xanarkand. Mm-hmm. He wanted to preserve Xanarkand in a dream. And it would have been nice to know his motivations for this. This is why I would like to have the scene.
Yeah, because you don't see him outside of
You don't see him at all.
Yeah,
he's just like a blob.
Yeah, and as the final boss. And it's like... And they even, like, there's this whole sequence where, like, Tidus doesn't know who Yu Yevon is.
No.
Because Yu Yevon apparently wanted to make a version of Xanarkand that was everlasting, but not himself. Like, he didn't want to be included.
Well, he is Sin, though.
Yeah,
basically
at that point,
he's responsible for the reincarnation of Sin.
Right, but if he wanted to, you would think that he would have a version of himself within the dream.
Yeah,
right? And he just
maybe
doesn't.
He does. Well, but we don't see it.
He's not the leader because Tidus doesn't know who he is.
Right?
He's just that disconnected.
That makes sense. Yeah, and so I think the Xanarkand that exists in the Dreams of the Faith is still like essentially a real place where people are born and live.
Right.
And Tidus, was born in the Dreams Xanarkand.
Mm-hmm. This is reminding me of my fan theory about Link's Awakening.
He was born... Oh, he's like a Marin.
Yeah, he was born in the dream. Mm-hmm. In the Bonica Bellucci dream. Yeah.
Link's Awakening 2, set in Xanarkand. The Sin Fish.
But I do genuinely love the ideas behind it.
Oh yeah. Conceptually, it's great, and I think Sin is a fantastic villain or antagonistic force.
Is very cool. I don't know if this is a joke largely, or if it's just a joke that I have privately. But did you know that Sin is jacked? Being a spoiler for this game, it's like a joke I tell because it isn't a spoiler because you find out hour 3 that is the case. But I like that. I like that whole idea, and I think the streamlining helps the overall story because you get this very conclusive sort of narrative from beginning to end where it's like, what are we doing? We're gathering the Aeons because we're on a pilgrimage to defeat Sin. When you get to the final Aeon, it doesn't go oh, your Aeon is in another castle. You just make the decision at that point to forgo the final Aeon and fight Sin au natural. And I'm fluent in French. And when you do that, it doesn't then send you on a big side quest. You can optionally do that, and I did. But from that point, you can go straight to the end. You just get on the boat, you fly up, you clear the DPS check, fly into Sin's face, boss, and then you do the final dungeon, and you're done. The final dungeon isn't even that long in comparison to, RPG,
every other JRPG,
yeah. Final Fantasy even, more so, from my understanding of it. So, it is. It's. I think that it feels very clean and very, straightforward, and sloppiness comes from the characters sort of failing to interact in the meantime.
Yeah, I think what's there is good, but I think it's a little oversimplified for my tastes. It's hard for me to engage with it and not think about the things that could be in there as well. You know what I mean? And I think it's got such a strong beginning. I think that's one of the reasons where it feels like it gets a little muddled with the Seymour stuff in the middle that I didn't like quite as much. But I love the atmosphere of it at the beginning, the introduction of Sin, and then how Tidus is taken out of, at the time you think he's taken to the future, and I just think that all has a really cool tone, and you get to see the changes through his eyes. And he's oh, I want to try and get back to Xanarkand, and there's this cool dynamic to the story, and it just kind of morphs into something else a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Tidus is even more so than most JRPG protagonists, has motivation to want to go back to Xanarkand. His life in Xanarkand was pretty fly, all things considered. He was abruptly taken from being a professional athlete. He had tons of adoring fans and was probably pretty rich. The only thing that he didn't like was Jack.
Yeah, his dad.
Yeah, which one of my favorite lines in the whole game, and there are a lot of lines that I like, is where he's like, I hope my dad never comes back. And his mom, who is his mom, and theoretically has like some kind of an emotional attachment both to Jecht and Tidus, says the words, you want him to come back, otherwise you'll never be able to tell him how much you hate him. Which is fantastic. But I think that Jecht gets like the biggest pass ever at the end of this game. Like, sure, maybe Tidus doesn't feel the same way about Jecht that he did when he was in Zanarkand.
Mm-hmm.
I'll accept that. But Jecht was an objectively terrible father. Like, he's a bad dad. He, like, criticizes his kid all the time, who was, like, 10, for crying. And he's, like, never at home, and then he just leaves without saying anything. Like, Tidus is right to hate him. Like, he's fully... allowed to do
the last thing he says to him while he's still alive is, I hate you.
Yeah. And Jecht is like, haha, you have to say that. And Tidus is like, oh, like, gives a face. Like, I don't really do this, but I'm saying it because we have to kill you now. And, like, he runs after him and tries to save him when he, like, falls off the thing. And then he becomes the final boss and the metal music plays. And then you beat him, and then he comes back as regular Jecht to die.
As a ghost, yeah. Or whatever.
And Tidus runs up to like, oh, I'm dead. I'm like, fuck that guy. You owe nothing to that man. But like everything else leading up to it is pretty cool. Everything after it's pretty good too. It's a weird mix. Like, this is a game where I love the plot, but don't love how it is told.
The execution.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
The Final Fantasy X novella would probably be a great read.
Yeah. I feel like Jecht, though, while being a shitty dad, is maybe the most interesting character to me. Like, him or Auron. I really would have liked more of them.
Well, did you go around all of Sphere collecting the Jecht spheres?
No, I
You
didn't.
fool! I didn't either. But I mean, there is more there.
Yeah.
But it's just so hidden in a way that didn't need to be hidden.
Yeah.
Also, notably, you like Jecht and Auron, but you don't like Braska, who gets like fucking nothing.
He gets no seconds of screen time.
Yeah. I feel like that's another character who gets fucking robbed by this game's like very straightforward approach, is that like Braska seems like a big deal and should be. Like, he has the most connections to members of the party than any other character in the whole game.
Yeah.
Because Jecht is Tidus' dad and his guardian. Auron is Yuna's guardian and his guardian. And he himself is Yuna's father. And, like, he shows up and just seems to be, like, a generally upstanding, noble dude. Like, he has no distinguishable character traits other than, like, what is expected of a summoner. And that sucks. Like, he should be deeper. And we should get more time with him, and he should have more importance.
Yeah,
but
and
he just doesn't.
He married an Albed woman. And so he's, like, looked down upon by all the, like, people at the temples and stuff, and like no one expects them to be able to complete the pilgrimage. Like, yeah, I would have liked to see more of his story.
Yeah. Final Fantasy X is really the story about people overcoming racial boundaries, because Yuna is the child of a human regular and an Albed, which I don't really understand. The Albed have their own language, but they just look like people, like regular, normal people, but with green eyes.
Yeah, apparently the Albed weren't supposed to have their own language in the beginning, and it was supposed to be the Guado that were more other.
Right.
But they changed it for some reason.
Well, they have their cake and eat it, though, because the Guado also have Seymour, who is the son of a Guado and a human.
Right.
Which is another...
Which is a parallel with Yuna.
Right, yeah. So, Yeah, there's like a little bit of both. It's weird, like, because if the Al Bhed are just like the cool atheists, and
that's basically what they are. Yeah.
Yeah, but why do they have a genetic difference? Like, it's super weird. Like, the first atheists apparently were just like both had green eyes, and then it just sort of propagated throughout very quickly because it's only been at most 1,000 years. It's been a weird time for Spira, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of lore and shit that I could not. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm like an expert in it, but like there are elements of the story that we could go into, but I don't know how important they really are.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I was surprised at how much I liked this game, and a lot of that had to do with how much I liked just the base narrative. Like, I think Sin is just carries the whole thing because he's very cool. Both he looks cool, and he's like in the end, he is still really the like boss. Like, he's the boss.
Yeah.
You cut his fucking arms off, and then you blast into his throat, and then you fight through his body. And well, then Seymour's there, kind of a speed bump. He's bad. And then you continue to go through, which I didn't expect the Inside of Sin to be like a weird steampunk thing, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the end, and then you fight the guy who is essentially like the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the
Vraska's
Sin.
final Aeon.
Yeah. And so like it is still Sin all the way through, even if like there's a bad guy behind the bad guy. Like the Wizard of Oz is still the villain of the Wizard of Oz, not the little man who is actually the Wizard of Oz. Like it's like a conceptual thing, but I think Sin works really well, and I like. As discussed on the Death Stranding episode, I do love a flying whale.
Well, yeah, he's straight up just like an eldritch horror monster.
Yeah.
And I especially love it at the beginning where all you ever see are just pieces of him. It's the big fin coming up out of the water, and it's like 5 times the size of your boat, and it's like not even like it's like his shoulder blade or something, like just how big he is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good representation. They do a good like I don't know what the phrase is for this, but like they don't show too much of the monster.
Yeah.
It's good shit. I like it.
The Jaws principle.
Yeah. Yeah, Sin was actually an animatronic.
Yeah, they couldn't get it working.
So they can only show parts of Sin till the end.
Mm-hmm.
I like that part where you stuff the oxygen tank into Sin's mouth.
That's how you're able to do enough damage to him before he gets to you.
You want to talk about how you did enough damage to Sin before? All right, so I'm going to come clean on this one.
Okay.
I've been for years, like what, 2001, 20 years, I have been using the sphere grid as a go-to example of how to make a leveling system or like a skill unlocking system too complicated. And I make references to it in like episodes of this very podcast, and I'm like, the sphere grid was so stupid and huge and dumb. I don't know why anybody would. The sphere grid was such a failure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so as it turns out, I love the sphere grid. I'm an idiot, and I misremembered it or something, or I was dumb when I was a kid. But the sphere grid is the best innovation in this game, and I am shocked to hear my own voice say these words.
I don't know if I agree entirely with what you just said, but it is like not that bad, or like much better than I remembered.
Mm-hmm.
I think the things that people don't like about it are, or at least I know these are what I don't like about it, is I dislike the fact that your characters don't have a number associated with like a level that they are, so you know like how much you've been, like if you've been neglecting a person, like how far they are behind the rest of the party and stuff.
Sure.
I really hated not knowing that. The fact that there's like the grid is huge, and like you want to see more of it. It always feels like you want to see more of it than you're able to at one time.
During the sphere grid tutorial, it's like press this button to get a better view of the sphere
and
grid.
It's just like the whole thing.
It's the whole thing, or it tilts it. Like,
yeah.
Why are these your camera options?
Yeah, and then there's also just the fact that like the user experience of it's a little bit wonky, where you have to like click on your sphere and then like choose move and then move the spaces and then confirm and then it moves them and then you use the things. Mm-hmm. So it's like just a little bit clunky, and I think the fact that it got rid of like regular leveling, like I don't know, it was just like just weird enough for people to be like
yeah,
but in reality it's really not bad.
Right. I will go a step beyond and say that I think it is actively good. I have never played Final Fantasy X2, the sequel, but they dropped the sphere grid in that, didn't they?
I've never played Final Fantasy X-2. I did look into it a bit, just out of curiosity after finishing 10.1, mm-hmm. and I didn't hear any mention of the sphere grid, so...
Yeah, I feel like I could be talking completely out of my ass here, but I know that future Final Fantasy games do not use the sphere grid. It was dropped at least within the X family mm-hmm. of games. So I don't think it got proper time to be like streamlined and like iterated on, but there's something about the sphere grid that I like a lot that appeals to me, and I don't know, this is probably not a universal thing, which is why I'm so shocked, I think, that I like it, is that it gives you an unprecedented amount of control over, like, planning. Like, when you play a Final Fantasy game, you got your attack man, and your defense man, and your big man, and then the healer, the mage, maybe another mage, like a thief, whatever. You have your character classes, and they just do the shit that they do. And you level up, and their stats and their numbers go up, and it's cool and whatever, and you love it. And you're like, oh, my guy does more damage now. But you can't really, in most traditional level up systems, you cannot make, like, builds. Like, you cannot choose how you want your characters to play in a really specific way. And the sphere grid allows a lot of customization and also a lot of planning, which I hate slow stuff, but and strategy games, but I do love planning, and I don't know why. So I would look at the sphere grid as this, like, I'm always thinking like 10 levels from now. Like, what do I do when I get to this point in the grid? Do I go this way, that way? Do I take the stat cul-de-sac, or do I like keep powering toward like their final ability? Once they get their final ability, whose sphere grid am I going to send them to after that? I like that Kamari, despite the fact that this really hurts Kamari statistically, I like the fact that the guy whose ability is to like absorb the overdrives of other people also splits off his own grid really quickly. Like, he can become a doppelganger of whoever you want mm-hmm. When he gets to a certain level very early in the game. I just think conceptually it's a much better idea than I ever gave it credit for, and I fully agree that it's clunky as shit. And like, I hate moving around on it, and I know that you can do crazy shit in this game and get like 99 sphere levels after one fight, and then go back in and dump points in and max everyone's stats out. And I can't even fucking imagine how long that takes, because you have to individually move the spheres around.
Yeah, and you need the spheres to actually activate the spaces.
Exactly. Yeah, like, it's probably like a 1,000,000-hour thing. And I did it when I was a kid. I don't remember this shit, but I remember that I did have maxed out characters, or at least like close to it. I fought super bosses. And it's insane. Like, that it is clunky and shitty, but I love the idea way more than I thought that I would.
Yeah. Same here. I don't like it as much as you, but I did like it a lot more than I thought. I think the things that would make it good, just straight up good in my mind, would be like if they actually just gave you a fucking number associated with a level, mm-hmm. so you can know. Because I like to level up characters evenly. Like, that's just a thing that I do. And I hated not knowing. Like, I was like, I know Kamari's behind, but I have no idea how far. I didn't realize like his shtick was that he split off into someone else's grid. Like it took me like a while to like realize that's what had happened.
Right.
And I unknowingly sent him down Titus's path, which was a mistake. I should have sent him down somebody else's, but he was just a shittier Titus in my playthrough, so I don't recommend that. So yeah, if you gave a level number and also, God, what was my other thing?
Made it less clunky.
You didn't get points so often. Like, I felt like I had to go into the sphere grid after every battle, pretty
more
much.
or less.
Like, that annoyed the crap out of me.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you... It's like a weird balance because, like, it does give you a feeling of progression. Like, imagine that you were playing a regular RPG and the max level wasn't 99, it was like 3,000, and you like got levels all the time, and you were like, oh, look at how strong I'm getting and shit. I'm level 619 right now, and that is essentially what is happening here, except the in-between step where it would take 1 frame for a menu to pop up and say your strength went up by 1. You now have to go into a menu, go to the guy, make sure that you have a sphere to fill in the thing that you're going to, move to it, and then insert it. So yeah, I 100% agree. Like, I feel like it takes too long for its own good. That's why I want it to be iterated on.
Yeah.
Where's the indie sphere grid game?
There might be something like that out there. Like, the closest thing I can come up with, and it's probably not even that close of a comparison, but it's just what I can think of right now, is in the Final Fantasy VII remake. Your equipment, like your like armor and weapons and stuff, all have abilities that you can assign to them, but you have like a limited pool to pick from, and like it's represented like in a cool space looking UI thing where it's like a little like planetoid in the middle with like the abilities swirling around it, and you pick the ones that you want, and then you move to the next item and whatever
on the arm of the galaxy.
Yeah, but so that's like taking a similar idea and applying it to like weapon and armor upgrades. So I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of. But yeah, I know I'm on the same page though. Like, I would actually like to see a version of this that's not so like rough around the edges.
Both like literally and like aesthetically, because it is on like a weird crumbling rock structure.
Because like character customization is one of like the best things about RPGs. Is like you get connected to the characters, and like you get to feel like my Titus is like different than your Titus. You know?
It's like
you
Titus.
You build them up with your own 2 hands or whatever. So, and this definitely has a focus on that. The sphere grid. And
it feels good. Like, it feels interesting. Oh, man, got a lot here. My brain is swirling, like that level up system you were just talking about. You can make like mixes where you're not sure of what the results are really gonna be, and that is exciting and interesting. It's like part of the reason that I like Riku as a character, and why I liked her more when I was a kid than I did this time through, is that the mix overdrive feels so unique. It feels really unpredictable, and I was excited about the prospect of not knowing what was going to happen when I used it. Like, I liked just being like, I don't even know what this item is. Like, do I want to get rid of this item? What if it does some really cool shit?
I hate that. Like, it gives me choice paralysis, and I always feel like I'm going to waste stuff.
This
I like
game
it
has
on
a weird relationship with items, but we'll get to that later.
Like, I like it on paper, like, but like I was like, if I do this and it sucks, I just wasted the overdrive. Like, it always felt like the cost was too steep to experiment to me.
I guess that's fair. I think a lot of it is like, how willing are you to go out of your way to get unique mix ingredients? Because if you have shit that's just like laying around, because like early in the game, mix feels like useless, because you just like
Riku feels useless when you first get her, because she like dies in one hit.
And sucks and can't do damage. But I just like had a memory of liking Riku, and so I made sure to like use her as much as I could to level her up quickly. And I still do like Riku, and I still used her a lot in the game.
She's one of the best characters in the game, I think.
weirdly did not use her in the final boss, but we'll talk about that.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. Well,
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we have to get over regular combat before we can get to end game content.
But we talked a lot about the sphere grid, but we didn't actually talk about like the combat system.
Right, yeah, that levels you up in the sphere grid.
Yeah. That's what it's for, right? But this is Final Sphere Grid 10. But I actually think this is my favorite, like, pure turn-based combat system in the Final Fantasy series. Like,
okay.
I like the ability to just swap your party members out, like, whenever, over, like, the ATB bar.
Mm-hmm. It's great. And I feel like the timing system, like the agility system, in the way that you have like a bar that shows how likely you are to get like a little extra turn if you take a less necessary action that turn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just feels good. Like, that part is also great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like so yeah, it's super useful. You feel like you're using the whole party more, instead of just being limited to 3 characters. Like, you can have access to any of them in any fight. You could use every character in every fight if you want to, very easily. And I also felt like they balanced the combat really well to where like buffs and spells felt a lot more useful than they do in a lot of RPGs, because like they just felt like they became like naturally like useful way earlier in the game than they do in most RPGs.
Yes. 1,000,000% yes. I think that's part of the reason why I like this combat system more than most in JRPGs, is because it feels like... So, this is the worst example because I'm taking something that has like teeth and formulas and is complicated, Final Fantasy X, versus like the literal simplest thing in the whole world. But if you look at Pokemon and you're just playing through the game casually, you're not playing fucking VGC.
Yeah, you end up in a lot of RPGs, like the majority of, like at least half the playthrough, you run into that situation where it's just like easiest to just hit stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that you really do. And there's like, you get all these abilities and they just pile up and you don't really need them.
Yep. And especially in these, like in other JRPGs, it's like you end up you feel like you waste turns when you use buff spells. And
yep.
I feel like part of the reason that I engaged with this is because those spells feel like they have a real technical advantage.
Oh yeah, like haste is probably like the most valuable move in the game.
100% the most cast, third most cast spell in my playthrough.
Yeah, like
probably.
Pretty much any battle that I wasn't gonna like, roll over easily. I'm casting haste, I'm casting protect or shell or like cheer.
Right.
All those moves, and like so much more than I would in most other RPGs.
Yeah, I wish Yuna had an earlier skill than Prey, like something to do when she doesn't have to heal someone, because I felt like she was the one most likely to have like a dead turn, where she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
I always thought there was like a protect you spell that I could cast on somebody.
That is true. I mean, protect doesn't come until like later in the game, and I think before that is when I'm talking like.
Well, early
she's
on,
really fast.
Yeah, early
too.
on she can only heal.
Yeah, and you end up being like, she has 2 turns in combat, which is why I never used her early in the game. And then she is the one who dealt the final blow to the last boss.
Yeah, I can't not keep a healer in my party all the time, so like Yuna was probably like the highest like leveled character I
coward.
Had. That's just the way I am. Like, I have to have a healer in the party. I can't stand not to.
This is why we're friends, because I always play healers in everything that I do. How fucking miserable was that like good 3-hour period of the game where you just don't have Yuna?
It was fine because of Albed potions, the best item in the game.
You're not wrong. They are great.
Yeah, and then thank God, like towards the end, you can just buy them from the merchant on the airship.
Mm-hmm.
Those are clutch.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you ever hit a robot to death with a sword? Or did
Oh
you...
no, Riku can just
that
dismantle them.
So well stocked on Alban potions and grenades.
Yeah, like, but it did make that part where you're separated from Yuna really effective on me because I relied on her a lot.
Right.
So that moment landed exactly, I think, as they wanted, because it's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you're separated from her. So like, I'm like, when am I gonna get her back? I don't want to run out of these potions. Like, I always felt like I was gonna get fucked.
Yep. Just be like, I can't heal anybody anymore. Like, I have to just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was real good.
Yeah, full agree. That's like, we've talked about like games where they take away your equipment or shit, and like whether that lands well or not. Like, some games do it well, other games don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is a great example of where you can take away one piece, but it's like an important piece. It's an important cog in the machine.
Yeah.
And it's like some characters just become like kind of unusable without Yuna. Like, I found that like I was way less likely to swap in like a Kamari situation, because his defense, I took him down the Lulu path. Note, neither of us took him down like the accepted good path, which I think is Riku's.
I would have guessed Orin. That's what I was wishing I would have done, but
right. There's a lot of different ways you can go with him, but like, so he was really squishy for me, but he had a lot of HP from his early shit, and so I was really scared to ever put him in, because I feel like he would just get slaughtered and I could never heal him. It's a weird push and pull as to like how the different members of your party work with everyone else. And I think that's why swapping out is so good.
Yeah, and it also like helps that sequence like narratively, like it makes Yuna seem really important to the party, and like she is the most important character in the party, like narratively. So like it's definitely like one of those situations where they like unify the gameplay. Oh, that was actually totally unintentional.
My eyebrows fell off the top of my head when you said that.
Yeah, but they unify the narrative and the gameplay there.
How often did you summon?
Early on, like hardly ever. But as it went on, I ended up summoning a lot, actually. Like, I always wanted to have, like, the summons, like, overdrives maxed out, so I would, like, you know, grind them out and, like, dismiss them so that I had that in the bank. So, yeah, and, like, early on, like, I remember being really annoyed by the cutscenes, but, like, once I hit, like, a certain threshold, they just didn't bother me anymore. So, I don't know. Like, I ended up summoning quite a bit.
I won't jump too far ahead in this discussion, but I never got used to the cutscenes like taking so long. Like, I feel like we talked about this a bit before, where they should let you skip cutscenes after you've seen them for once.
Yeah,
and that applies to that as well.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, it takes so long, and in the end, like, I didn't do jack shit with any of the Aeons. Like, I almost never summoned, and I would summon them to take a big hit from a telegraphable boss.
Yeah, and they are good for that.
Yeah, so I mostly use them as just like sacrificial fodder.
Yeah, but you do one better though. If you have their overdrive maxed out, you summon them, they can blast the boss then take the hit.
Yeah, I did that a couple of times for sure, but like it was never like that's the prime directive.
Yeah, that's how I beat the final version of Seymour.
Oh yeah,
like spaceship Seymour. Hoffman. As he's known.
Oh my god.
But
rest in peace, Philip Seymour Hoffman. You've been replaced.
By spaceship Seymour Hoffman. But anyway, yeah, you max out all the overdrives on all your Aeons, and then you just summon them all back to back, and it will do all the damage on him. It'll kill him.
Wait, okay, hold on. Is Spaceship Seymour...
After he kills all the Ronso, yeah.
So not Golden Boy.
No, not at the
Seymour.
end.
Yeah.
Not at the end, no.
That's the fake version of Seymour.
It's when you, like, canonically kill him in the game,
right,
and then he's, like, unsent at the end. But yeah, that battle, you have all the Ions charged up, and they just do all of his health. Mm-hmm. If you summon them all back to back and just blast him.
Yeah. No, and I've heard that discussed as well, just like if you are building like if you build your Aeons well and like teach them new spells and increase their stats like they want you to.
I did that once and regretted it intensely because it uses up so many spheres, and I had to grind out a bunch of power spheres or whatever, and I was like, I shouldn't have done that. They were good enough.
You were at a bad. I think my understanding of it was that you were at like kind of a bad point in the game for it as well.
Yeah,
because like you weren't just like rolling in spheres, but you are at the end of the game where you're like, I'm never going to use 99 spheres. It just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and in the beginning, you're also kind of rolling in them as well. Like in the middle, it kind of dips.
Yeah, I remember there was a point where I ran out of magic spheres, and I was like, you can run out.
Yeah.
I was so surprised. So I had to like use distill magic, which I'd really just never done.
Yep, and extract speed and all that stuff. It's, I hit a point where I needed to grind anyway, so I just grinded out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
There were some piranhas that would drop attack spheres, and I had extract speed on like several characters for some reason.
Right.
And so it wasn't too bad.
Well, you did send Kamari down to
that's why. That's what it was.
Yep.
But
yeah, that was really so downside of the sphere grid, which isn't a downside of the sphere grid. Perfect baby.
It takes a depletable resource to use it.
Well, no, but notably the it's more of a problem with the menu system where you, unless I just didn't see this as a setting, but you can't like remove things from the menu, and like after you get like Fira and
Blizzaga.
Well, I mean the second level ones.
Blizzara.
Yeah, you would never use the first level spells again. Like the cost difference isn't enough to like really give a shit.
Yeah, that's true in this game for sure.
Yeah, so I feel like there should be an option to just like blank those. Because all right, I'll go ahead and I'll jump to it now.
That's way too modern of a feature for this game to have had.
That's probably true. I keep forgetting it was 2001.
Yeah, it's a pretty old game. Yeah, actually. It's getting up there.
Yeah, at the end of the game, pretty much the only thing I was doing was double cast Flare.
Yep.
Just over and over again.
Yep.
And so I would have to scroll to the bottom of this long ass list of spells.
You should have a hotkey like Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Hotkey those spells.
That would be great. Just press fucking triangle of double cast Flare.
Yeah. L1, double cast Flare. Done.
That's it. That's all you need. And Yuna was double casting Ultima because I warped her over to where Kamari was, who was on Lulu's tree. Bear with me. And dropped her down to pick up double cast because I thought that she could double cast white magic spells, but you can't.
Only black. Yeah.
So she had to double cast Ultima, which is such a long fucking cutscene.
I didn't get Ultima.
It costs a lot of spheres, and you didn't spend as much time wandering around in the fucking desert as I did.
But yeah, Holy was good enough for me.
Yeah, Holy is good. It would be nice if you could double cast. And
yeah.
I mean, at the end...
it does 9999 damage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, both
and it costs like 84 MP.
Oh, this probably isn't even that relevant, but there was a discrepancy between my understanding of how much Demi cost and how much you thought it cost, and I found out why. It's because I was using a weapon with the ability Magic Boost, which doubles. Yeah, and I didn't know that at all. I was just like, this is a really expensive spell, and eventually figured that out, and then I just appended 1 MP cost
with
on the
Lulu,
weapon that I had.
I ended up getting a Cactuar like weapon, familiar, whatever you want to call her, weapon, her focus.
Yeah, I don't know if they're supposed to be alive or if they're pets.
I think they're just like
dolls?
They're just dolls that she like animates with magic or whatever. That's my read anyway. But I got a Cactuar one early on that had sensor and some other good ability, and like I used it the whole game. Like I never got a better weapon than that.
Yeah.
Till like the end of the game.
Yeah, I got also a Cactuar that had Magic Boost on it. It was like 120,000 gil from the dude, the merchant guy on the mountain, and I was like, fuck it, why not? It had magic boost. I don't know if that is. Sounds good though. And then it had like some other magic enhancing abilities on it. I was like, I'll take it. And then it had a 4th open slot. So by the end of the game, I was able to just stick 1 MP cost on it. I was like, done. Build your own celestial weapon. Though I realized as I was playing that if I had the actual celestial weapon, which nobody's fucking dodging 200 stupid lightning bolts to get it, but if I did, and it had the break damage limit thing, I would probably have been doing like a really stupid amount of damage. And I don't necessarily regret not dodging 200 lightning bolts.
I found a video that claimed that there's some kind of trick to doing it like easily that you can do, but I still feel like it's probably not worth it still.
No.
For me anyway.
No, apparently it was worth it for me when I was 10, but it sure ain't now when I'm pushing 30. I have precious little time left. Not gonna spend it dodging lightning bolts.
Slipping away all the time, faster than a lightning bolt. Better dodge out of the way.
Yep. Oh god. I want to talk about Waka.
Waka Waka.
Waka Waka. I think Waka has a problem. Because when people talk about, when the internet people, the people who live there on the internet, they talk about Waka as being like one of the best characters in the game by like a margin so wide it's laughable to compare anyone to it. When you play the game as a normal person, Waka feels weak like the whole game because his shtick is he's the status effect guy.
The sniper.
Yeah, and he also hits flying things. So he hits flying things, which he's great at. Love doing that with him. That's great. But then his other thing is that all of his like special abilities are like dark, sleep, poison, that kind of stuff. Like he just does effects. And I feel like they all feel so situational because most bosses are just like immune to most status effects. Like you're not going to put Jacked to sleep. Like he's not just gonna be, oh, now I'm gonna take a nap now.
I actually think you can, but he has those things that heal him.
Oh yeah,
like you can do status effects to him, but he just gets healed immediately.
That would make sense. He doesn't get healed enough, from my experience. But yeah, so I think Waka feels bad to use for a lot of, I would say a lot of people, but at least me.
I found that to be true as well. Like, one of the reasons I think I got stuck when I was a kid is because I never used Waka, and then I got stuck in the shoe puff part. The shoe puff marshmallow men.
Oh, so
like
you were stuck
you fall into the water, and then you fight, there's like a piranha thing, and then you fight this robot, this machina under the water, and I could not beat that fucking thing, because it's just Tidus and Waka, and I probably didn't grasp how important haste was. Because I was a dumb child. But, and yeah, so like Waka was underleveled and, you know, like I just couldn't beat that boss. And, but yeah, I think Waka, I think you're right. He feels weak for most of the game, but then I got into a point later on where he actually was like it felt like all of the sudden he was doing like more damage than like Tidus.
Right.
Like, you know, like somewhere between Tidus and Orin. I'm like, where did this come from? Like...
Yeah.
I don't know if I guess I was just being negligent or something, but like I just kind of seemed like he got good all of the sudden.
Yeah, I feel like the way that Waka worked for me is that like you end up using him because of his accuracy.
Yeah.
Like that's his point. And so he still like got levels and like he was competent. Like he was one of the last people to finish like his grid for me.
Yeah, like I used him more than Kamari, but like less than everyone else, pretty much.
That sounds exactly the same for me. Yeah. And yeah, so like, but he was competent. Like he wasn't like hopelessly underleveled. And I felt like his climb and damage was very slow, and also had moments where he just felt useless again. Like there'd be enemies that you would attack where he would deal like 6,000 damage to them.
Yeah.
And then Tidus would deal like chump change. He'd be doing like 1,500, 2,000 something. And like with generally the same type of equipment that they were using. There's a lot of variables. And then like later on you would find more shit and Waka would just be like, ugh, and like toss a ball at somebody for like 30 damage. And you're like, what happened here? Like, why is Tidus out damaging you now? And I don't understand, like, even when they're on the same tree.
Yeah, I think my interpretation, or like what I thought was going on with stuff like that is like they tutorialize, I think, like, I don't know if it's like enemy types, like with Orin, it's like the things that are like big and bulky and look like rock dudes.
Right.
Orin can do like a bunch of damage to them, but like Tidus can't do any. I think it's like one of those situations, like there's certain kinds of enemies that Waka is bad against, but it isn't telegraphed very well.
Right. Yeah, especially with what, because like with Orin, it's easy to see like the piercing weapon weak enemies all do look like fucking
big
boulders.
Rock boulders, yeah.
And then Wonka is like, yeah, super easy to see that he can hit birds, but like what about like a big like a boss? Like, I don't know. And like I think like the most useful that he ever got from me is when I found a ball that gave poison strike, and so it was just like I would just hit people with the poison and just switch him out. I'm like, all right, good job.
He was a switch hitter. That's one of the names of one of his weapons.
His switch hitter.
So aptly named because that's what he was.
Yeah.
You'd throw him in and like use like silence or dark or whatever ball on them and then swap them out, put someone else in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's Waka, Riku, and Kamari, I feel like have a readability problem. It's hard to see what they're good at. Whereas the other characters, it's extremely very obvious.
Yeah. I thought Riku only really started out that way, but then quickly, like, I found her niche pretty fast, I thought. She's so fast, too. Like, I'd always switch her into the party. Like, I'd always walk around with Tidus, Riku, and Yuna in the party.
I couldn't be bothered to go into menus
and then you
much.
swap them out as needed when the fight actually starts.
Yeah.
I mean, you were already going into the menu. You might as well.
You had to level up every battle.
So you might as well switch them.
Yeah.
No, but it is annoying to, like, remember to do that. But
yeah.
I got in the habit of it.
I don't know what else I have. I used Auron a whole lot.
Auron is probably the best character, I think. At least for me, like how it felt to play. You want to talk about the side content?
I do.
Because we talked about that off the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to talk about... I don't know. I opened my fucking notes.
As if there's anything written there.
No, I do have stuff. But I think I have nothing on this in particular, I don't think. I wanted to give this game sort of its, like, intended experience, or at least, like, my nostalgic experience of the game. I wanted, like, to rehash that while I still had love in my heart. And the game does its best to sap all of it out of you if you try and go for any of this stuff. But I, as a kid, did do a bunch of bullshit because I had infinite time and I wanted to go through and complete everything in the game. That's just like how I was and how a lot of people were when they were younger. And so I tried to do a bunch of the side content in this game. And man, oh man, if you were not using a walkthrough for like every single step, a lot of this stuff is so esoteric, I don't know how you're ever supposed to find it.
Yeah. And I feel like it's exactly the kind of like side content I don't like the kind that you need a guide to do. Or to even know that it exists. Like, if you hadn't mentioned that there are celestial weapons in the game to me, I wouldn't have known there were celestial weapons in the game.
Right.
Because, like, I feel like it's the linear path of the game. And then the fact that you don't get the airship travel till the end-ish. You don't really have any reason to go back. Like, no one, like, I feel like there's a point in, like, the middle of the game, like, maybe when you get to, like, the desert or, like, the calm lands, like, you get to a more open area they should have like had some kind of scenario, or you get some kind of fast travel. If they want to hold back the ship till later, I get maybe like you get a chocobo thing, like a chocobo cart that can like take you to a specific kind of area or whatever.
Yeah, like you pay for it or something, so that the airship
like
still
a taxi,
feels like a big upgrade.
Yeah, like a taxi service, and you can only take you to certain places. Something like that. That in like it like encourage you to go look around. Like I got to the Calm Lands the first time, and I noticed that there was stuff off to the right hand side, but I just didn't go to it because like I couldn't figure out how to get across the gap. So I'm like, oh, it's like an open area. Like I'll probably come back through here or something. Like it seems like there's stuff here.
Right.
Like I'll just kind of follow the trail and then I'll come back. But you don't come back. Like you just move right on. It's the way it's implemented into the game, just like it's a little bit too secret, a little bit too extra, like it's kind of like it's tacked on.
Right. Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of things that are just like scattered throughout this game, and there are a few that I like. I want to call out, I think the Albed primers, the fact that you can slowly translate the Albed language like in your subtitle text is cool, and is what leads to getting passcodes for the airship to go to secret areas. And there's like 5 of them or something like that you can find. They're like on walls, and you like look at the wall and it tells you the passcode, but it tells it to you in Albed, so you have to translate it first. And I like that, and I also like that is, I think, the easiest hint for celestial weapons existing at all. Well, the easiest one is probably the monster arena thing, but we'll get into that because I hate the monster arena so fucking much. But there's like one of those that leads you to God Hand, which is Riku's celestial weapon, and it's real easy to upgrade, but I don't know how anybody knows how to upgrade it without having a guide. It doesn't make you have to literally comb every fucking inch of the game to find all this shit. Like, there's some easy ones that you'll probably just get. One of Yuna's upgrade items is just like in a chest off the coast of the very first area of the game, and like Lulu's is just in the far plane. Like if you leave the far plane, then just immediately walk back in, there's a chest and you can open it, it's there. So that kind of shit does exist and can kind of clue you in, but like the item descriptions don't really tell you anything, and it's just really hard to find. But that lends this sort of like air of mystery, of coolness to them, that makes them like an enticing thing to go for. And that is what I like about it. And then everything else is bad and I hate it.
Yeah. I mean, like, because I probably...
The Aeons are cool, too.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like if the game would have given even a little bit of, like, a nudge or acknowledgement, like, opened it up in the middle of the game, like, I feel like I would have done some of the stuff. But, like, getting towards the end and getting the airship and then, like, having trouble with some of the late bosses and Googling stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, there's all this shit, and, like, I just want this game to be over, and I don't want to do any of this crap.
Right.
Like, you know, like, it just feels like it's, like, a weight that gets dumped on you if you don't, like, because it just doesn't tell you about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the end game, like, there is, I referred to it earlier, the Sin fight where you're on the ship, is like it's a DPS check. It's a can you deal enough damage?
I couldn't do that, and I had to like look up like what the fuck, what the fuck FFX? Question mark.
And you're like, especially because like the first half of the battle, like it's solid like 30% probably of the time that you have to deal damage. You can only deal damage with range.
Yeah, Lulu and Waka.
Yeah, and if you don't have them dealing a bunch of damage, which I don't know, half of people probably don't.
Yeah.
Like, you have to just power level or go on these ridiculous side quests to go get super strong shit. And, like, I didn't hate all of my time doing some of this stuff. Like, it was nice to go back and revisit stuff and all that. For the record, I did not get every celestial weapon. I didn't do all of the Aeons. I, in fact, they added something, I think. I know it was added eventually, but I don't remember what version doesn't have it. So I may have dealt with this as a kid, or I've never seen them before, and I don't know. But dark aeons, which are just like insane, giant
secret bosses
that are super hard to beat. I ran into one on accident, and it team wiped me in 1 second. Like it went first, and then it killed everyone in one hit. It was just like 999s across the board, and I was like, okay, so I guess don't go there. And they put one of them in Besaid Village, right outside of the temple, which blocks you off from going back. Which there's like a key item that you need for one of the things. And you have to be able to you have to have done the optional puzzle in the temple in order to unlock Anima. And you need Anima to get Yuna's secret weapon, or celestial weapon, fucking whatever. And it's like strongly recommended that you have these Aeons in order to beat the Dark Aeons. But if you can't beat the Dark Aeon, then you can't get the other Aeon to then get the weapon to beat the Aeon. Yeah. It's so stupid.
They expect you to have not missed the item in the temple.
Right. Which you're never, as you mentioned, ever going to just go back in the middle of the game. Mm-hmm. You're going to wait until it's already there to murder you before you return.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, that seems like a change that was made with, like, veteran players in mind, and fuck everyone else.
Yeah. Like, I set my goal, but before I finished the game, I was like, I want to get Anima. Anima was the one that I wanted for sure. But I had this plan way after I had already completed Besaid Temple, so I didn't know that I missed the Destruction Sphere puzzle. And then when I went to the palace thing, the little statue wasn't lit up, and that's when I realized that like my hopes and dreams were falling down and burning in flames.
Yeah. But random story thing. I really like that Anima is Seymour's final Aeon. I think that's a cool like narrative detail that it's like his mom.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it also seems like very much in pain.
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually know what Anima's story is.
Yeah, I think it's that Seymour's half Guado, half human. Mm-hmm. I think his mom was human.
Right.
Yeah, and his dad was
a Guado.
Yeah, like Maester, whatever.
Maester...
Doesn't matter.
I'll think of it.
And like, but he was like shunned by like the Guado people for like being half human, and obviously they didn't like her either. And so they made a pilgrimage because she wanted to like him like to be his final Aeon and for him to defeat Sin so that he would be like accepted. But then he ended up just not fighting Sin. Like he just
fucked off.
Yeah, he fucked off. And so I guess like the kind of like sacrifice and like the lingering like guilt of her son just carrying like that ostracization or whatever around.
Right. Well, that explains the sad top half, but what's up with the demon bottom half that punches you to death?
It's also a mother's rage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know, but I just thought that was like a cool backstory.
I agree, and I'm sure that like a lot of them.
It's like I got like a curse kind of vibe to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's part of the thing where like these are kind of deep. I know that if you summon Anima when fighting Seymour in the last boss, he'll be like, "I see even my own mother opposes me," which if you don't know any of that, it's confusing as hell.
Yeah, I only found out while like doing post research because it's like a secret thing. You had to get Anima to learn it.
And Anima's not even like that difficult to obtain. I got Yojimbo, who is like harder but still pretty easy. The Magus sisters are the only ones that are like legitimately kind of difficult to get. But still, it's a rough shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even like opposed to the idea of super bosses and things.
No, I love
like
super
ultra
bosses.
Endgame. Yeah. I feel like the placement and unavoidability of them is really something else.
Yeah, and I also like this might not matter as much for other people, but like it presents itself as just like a move forward linear experience, and then like, as I said, I feel like it's just not integrated well, like the extra content. Like, I feel like a little bit of effort in the design in that department goes a long way to like making people care about that stuff.
Yeah. But people do.
They do. Plenty of people do.
It's because it's a Final Fantasy game, though. I think people want to squeeze everything they can out of it.
Yeah, and the time it came out. Like, this is me playing it now. This stuff seems like a big deal. But if I played it then, I'd have done at least some of this shit, you know?
Right.
Like, I would have wanted to just keep playing it because I was a kid and had tons of free time.
Yeah. So did you never, ever go to the Monster Arena?
I did go there. I didn't ever fight in it. I just did the chocobo thing under it.
Oh, no, not that place.
No, not that place. The place with the guy.
The guy in the weird statue that moves around?
Yeah, I did go there, yes.
Yeah. It sucks, and I hate it, and they put so much of the endgame content behind it as like a big wall. I understand its point to give you things to fight in order to get weird endgame gear, and I feel like they didn't need to make you, because if you're the purpose of it is to go get endgame shit for shit you need for the end of the game when you're already fucking super strong and powerful. But in order to do it, you have to go back to the very first area of the game and kill 10 dingoes. Which is not fun in any way. And obviously I didn't do that either. I did like the very minimum amount necessary to get the Mars sigil for Arin's secret weapon. But it is terrible. Like, it's a terribly long, boring, terrible side quest. And I do not get it. I feel like they could have just had all the monsters that you can fight for the endgame stuff and just made it cost more money.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't know.
You want to talk about the final boss, I guess?
I do,
and how you managed to kill it? So, for me, I playing this for the podcast had to do it in like a limited amount of time, which also deterred me from wanting to do all of the game guide extra content extravaganza.
Yeah.
So I ended up going with like the accepted easy strat, as it seems online, of like getting the Wings of Discovery from racing the chocobo and the weird little chest race minigame, so that you can synthesize trio of 9999 with Riku and have everyone in your party do 9,999 damage. And also it's great for prey because you can just heal 9,999.
I didn't actually know it worked with that.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep, it works for healing too. It's even with potions.
Wow.
So the Albed potions, also amazing. So
you mean still amazing?
Still amazing, yeah. Even more amazing. And then Riku herself has these items called like gems, like fire gems, water gems, other like
elemental
holy gems, whatever.
Yeah. Blessed gems.
They will hit like 6 times. So you can kill Jek's first form if you're lucky in one hit from her.
Right.
I didn't get that lucky. It took like 2, but still, like that's really, really fast. And so that's how I managed to beat the final boss, is by having everyone do a shit ton of damage.
Right. So
and also some help from Bahamut.
Yeah. Yeah, tanking the overdrive.
And he can break the damage cap as well. And
with
deal.
Mega Flare.
Yeah.
Did you go in, die, look up the strategy, then go back in and do it again?
Yeah. I tried to figure something out myself, so I died to him several times, but then, I looked up the strat and came back.
Okay. My question, that if I was rating this, let's say on a scale of 1 to like 20, we're going to give it like a 1 to 10, but I can do half points. This would knock the game's rating down by a full half step, depending on the answer to this question, which is, if you die to the Jekt fight, do you have to run around and collect spears again in the icicle area?
Yep.
Oh, fuck that. I was so determined. Like, palms are sweaty.
Knees weak, arms are heavy.
Yeah. Fighting the final boss because I just didn't want to run around in the icicle area again.
Yeah, you have to do it again.
That sucks so bad.
It's not fun.
No, but I did. I completed in one, and I didn't use Riku because at that point in the game I had double cast on both Yuna and
double casting
Lulu.
Yeah,
and both casting Flare and Ultima over and over again, which Ultima's dangerous. I fucked up a bit. I'm lucky that I beat it on my first try, because if you use Ultima, if you double cast Ultima, and it kills the U pagodas that heal him, they come back with twice as much health as the damage you dealt to them, which normally, since it deals 10,000 damage, wouldn't be that bad because they have 5,000 health. So they would come back with 20,000 health. But they stick around and take both hits, so they actually come back with 40,000 health. And then I could just basically, I didn't try to touch them ever again. I would use Yuna to do other shit rather than attack. So it was really the Lulu show for the majority of the last, the final area. And the final boss. And then Yuna was summons the Aeons and looks sad and then just blasts them because she was the fastest character and also the one that dealt a billion damage. And so it was just her cycling through Aeons and murdering them herself. Which I feel like isn't the way it's supposed to look in game.
Yeah, that was also a really great thing after you beat Jex, that you fight all the Dark Aeons. That's pretty cool. You have to summon them yourself,
right,
and then kill them. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good.
Very
I
effective.
imagine if you used the Aeons more often, it probably is a affecting moment,
Yeah.
But I guess at that point you do know that you're never going back.
Yeah, and you also know their stats, how much HP they have and how they're not that going to be that hard to kill.
You said you had an item with sensor.
Yeah.
If you
I always had someone with sensor.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you used it on the Aeons, all of the dialogue at the top is just, they all just say send me to my end. It's all very dark.
Yeah. Well, I think the Faith said they're tired of dreaming, so
yeah.
I guess they want that sweet release.
And Tidus is I'm right here. Come on. Yeah. I don't know if that really... the final boss, I don't know if there's much to say because I think we both were in a situation where we were able to just kind of nuke it to death.
Yeah, but I feel like the game necessitates it.
I agree.
It's one of the things that kind of I thought left a bad taste in my mouth. It's just I got to the end and I'm I can't come anywhere close to beating this thing. And then I looked up what's the strategy to help me with this, and everyone's just do this thing that takes a bajillion hours to get all these powerful weapons and shit, or power level to get what you did, so you can just double cast the most powerful spells in the game for 1 MP. Or, something like that where you can just obliterate the boss, Trio of 9999,
right,
etc. And it's just nothing. There's no just oh, you just fight him like this. This is the strategy,
right,
to beat him with the game mechanics. It's oh no, do this cheesy stuff to deal a bajillion damage.
Right, which makes me feel like they should have treated the boss less like the other bosses in the game and more of an end game flourish.
Yeah,
where,
well, I mean,
he looks threatening, but he's really actually kind of easy.
Yeah, I mean, they do that with the Aeons and Yu Yevon at the end.
Yeah,
but Jecht himself, it feels kind of
is still tough.
Yeah,
I agree, and it's weird. I think because a lot of the other bosses, first of all, had save spheres nearby them, and you didn't have to go run through the stupid...
God, there's no... Because after you do that, you, are set down in, a little walkway up to where Jecht is.
Yeah.
No reason you can't have a save sphere right there.
Right.
It's a spot.
Mm-hmm. Just put us in.
It's meant to have one there, and it just doesn't.
And they just took it out.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to do the
needs
dumb
to be really
shit
hard.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think because, I said... knees weak, arms are sweaty. That's how it goes. And it like when I was doing it, like it did ratchet the tension up, but like not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't scared of losing to the boss because of like I just didn't want to run around and collect the orbs again.
Yeah, like no, I got to a point where like I felt like just giving up and not beating it, and like you don't want to put players in that headspace.
No. At least not without, like, actively telegraphing what they can do to get stronger.
Yeah.
Like, as we said, there's no real indication of, like, the super endgame items. And, like, thank God I ran around and caught all those stupid cactuars to get access to the cactuar village, which is just a brown patch of cactuses, to make Riku's final weapon, to then just not use her in the final fight at all. Like, I did all that, and then I went to the thing, and I just never used her. And it was like, maybe it wasn't worth it to do all that. It's just, I don't know. I think with a more clear indication that there were interesting things, and then a more focus on making those things actually interesting and not grindy. Because there's lots of grinding that you can do that you've probably already done some of. It's just sort of in the nature of the genre. Making the secret stuff grindy as well is not great.
Agreed.
Yeah. I did have one last thing. It's a very important note that we need to go over, which
is how do they breathe underwater?
Is how do they breathe underwater? I googled this. Someone has asked this question that isn't me, and apparently the answer is magic did it.
See, I found the answer I found, because I also looked this up, was that it's because of fireflies.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the magic that did it.
Oh, okay.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so apparently like the stuff that floats away when Yuna does the sending are fireflies. Apparently everything in this universe is like composed of them. And apparently it just like if you can like harness like their like energy or something, like you're fucking Superman, like getting energy from the sun or something, you can just hold your breath for a really long time. They're actually not breathing underwater. They just don't have to breathe
at all
for a really long period of time.
Yeah. I think there's a mention early in the game about blitzball players like training to hold their breath a long time. I'm glad we saved this conversation for the end.
Yep. This is where we get the really important stuff out of the way. So what was the actual thing you were going to say?
Fuck Bavel Temple.
Oh, the one with the conveyor belts. Yeah.
We didn't really talk about the trials at all.
Yeah. I don't feel like it's going to be anything you're going to be surprised to hear from me, but like I appreciate some puzzles in my RPG, like even if they're this shallow. The shout out to the one in the ice temple. Yeah, that one actually had a good puzzle, like where you come back and the bridge goes out.
Yeah. And
you have to like find out how to like restore power to all the pillars. Actually a well-designed puzzle.
Full agree. That one was actually super good.
Yeah.
I liked a few of them. Like,
yeah, like none of them were bad. They were just all like really...
Well, one of them was bad.
Well, okay. Conveyor belts were bad, but like they were all just like really simple.
Yeah. They were pretty simple, and there wasn't like they're not super involved. The mechanics involved with them are really easy to like understand. But yeah, I liked them, and I was surprised that most of the other puzzles in the game that just are out in the world feel very terrible in comparison. Like swim into 3 holes.
Yeah.
Which is not a puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially at this time, like RPGs were not known for like having puzzles. So I always appreciate when developers make any kind of effort to put something else in other than just combat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I am not surprised, as you described, and I'm
sure I've said the exact same thing on another episode before, but
also that music
in the temples
is actually dope. Also,
yeah,
it's super atmospheric in a way that really spoke to me.
The first temple you do is one of the most vivid memories I have of playing the game as a kid. So I guess that landed even better with me when I was a wee lad.
Yeah, I remember when we were like, we're going to do Final Fantasy X. The first thing that came into mind was Tidus standing stark still on that platform, rocketing through the Bevel Temple and missing turns. Have we cleared the topics we wanted to cover?
Mm-hmm. I think I peppered them all in nicely as we talked.
Nice. We're a well-seasoned podcast. Do we have fantasy thoughts?
Yeah. I probably came off a lot more critical than I intended on this. But I think that's because I played the majority of this game for the first time now in 2021. And it's kind of hard for me to like, I've kept judging the game on like based on what I wanted it to be rather than like what it was. One of those situations. But like when I try to divorce myself from that, like what's here is good. Like this is a good game. It just doesn't. I feel like a lot of, like, as I said probably over and over again, like it feels like they had to like sacrifice or streamline or cut down on things that I really appreciate about at least Final Fantasy games and largely RPGs in general to make like their visual goals happen. And in my opinion, like playing it now, in hindsight, it feels like it wasn't worth it. But when I think about it, like in its time, it feels like it totally was. You know, like it feels like a totally justifiable thing, and it made them tons of money. And I'm sure pushed the medium forward a lot and did a whole bunch of positive things in its time. But like, it's a decision that I don't think stands up nowadays. I think it ended up hurting it in the long run, at least for me personally. But I mean, this is like one of the highest regarded Final Fantasies. Like people love it, so maybe I'm in the minority on this one. But I did like this game. I didn't love it, but I am glad that I finally finished it. Like as I said, I played it as a kid, and if you've ever had a game like that like you started as a kid and you come back to as an adult, it's always a weird experience. It can be really very satisfying to find it's like a thing in the back of your mind is now
the weight has been lifted,
been released. Yeah, you get to perform the sending on that weight in the back of your mind. So yeah, I did like this, but it's a game that's almost kind of like God of War, the newer one. Like I find it really easy to be critical of it, even though I like it. So it kind of falls in that zone where it's like a flawed experience, but still a good one that I'm glad that I had.
Yeah. I think that you nailed the reason for this near the beginning of your final thoughts there, which is if you took somebody who had listened to the podcast previously and we each rated this game out of 10 and we slid the papers to them and told them like which one, who do you think picked which one, this is like a weird instance where they would be wrong. They'd be like, Final Fantasy X such like a regular ass RPG. Chad probably gave it like a 1 out of 10 and was like, I farted on this game and was like, that was better than playing it, haha. Because those are the kind of jokes I make. And I think what it is they cut out a lot of the stuff that you really like about RPGs and that I don't really like about RPGs. This game is streamlined, and I will never in a million years say that this is like a flawless example of an RPG. I think there are lots of strengths that the genre has that this game does not live up to. I think that the character development is kind of poor. I think that the world is really linear and like narrow, and there are things to do that are, because there aren't a lot of like little secret things to run off and do in the big open world, then they have to hide it behind a lot of grindy nonsense. But I spent the majority of this game up until the very end not really grinding, not having a super hard time with anything, just kind of like feeling like I was actually strategizing, like feeling like I was making smart decisions in combat, and really interested in even though I already knew because I have played it before, but like finding out how the story was going to end, what was going to happen in it, and like having that rush of nostalgia and just kind of like getting it. It felt like a very understandable and straightforward RPG, which I think is why ultimately I like this game a lot. It has flaws, like I talked about, and despite embarking on some of the end game quests, do not think largely that they are worth the effort. I'm sure that there are people out there where the rush of defeating like Nemesis or whatever is a big deal, and I don't want to take that from people, but I think that plays into the parts of RPGs that I don't really like, and the main story part of this game plays into most of the stuff that I do. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be going from a game that takes 50 hours to beat to a game that takes half an hour to beat, and yet I've already put in twice as much time as I did into Final Fantasy. We're going to be talking about Supergiant's Hades.
We couldn't put it off any longer.
He tried so hard, but he's like, Chad's never going to play any of these other games if we don't talk about Hades, and get him to just stop for 1 minute.
Please, God.
Please, Zeus.
Please, Zeus. Almighty Zeus.
Which is a roguelike, which will be by the time it comes out, it'll be the second time that we've talked about a roguelike, but I don't know, looking forward to it, because I've already played it and don't have to do a lot of work. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find our email address, our Twitter, link to our Discord where you can talk about the game. This game actually came it came from Japan, but it was suggested to us on our Discord, and it was kind of a game that we considered way back in the day, and just never kind of got around to, but that was the push. So if you would like to push us...
Yeah, we've been doing the cast for a while now, so like we don't have quite as many ideas we're like dying to do, so like we're much more open to suggestions now, and it won't take us a million years to pencil them in, because we used to plan like super far in advance.
Yeah, we'd be like, oh well, I guess we could do this 3-hour game 6 months from now.
Yeah.
After we finish all this
I guess stuff. So yeah, like please leave us suggestions.
And links to all of our old episodes. You can listen to our episodes on Chrono Trigger, Persona 5, we do
Kingdom Hearts,
and Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah, it's got Tidus and Waka in it, and Orin's in the second one.
Like button.
Double cast that like button.
No, don't do that. Then I'll turn it back off.
Oh no.
We don't need to unlike the video.
It'll like and it'll subscribe.
You can double cast do both. Yeah. If liking and subscribing are black magic.
Yeah, and you can only communicate in the comments if you found all the Alved primers, because it's going to be an all Alved comment section.
Okay, if somebody leaves a comment in Alved,
I'll give them $5.
I will not do that. But I'll put the little heart on the comment.
That's the greatest reward.
It is. A reward reserved. See you guys later.
This concludes our podcast day.
Let's blitz.
Let's blitz.
Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who fuck my dumb ass.
It's perfect for me then.
I think
finally a podcast for us.